Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today in War Thunder it's time to have a look at the suggestions which were passed to the developers in December of 2018. Now these were passed a few days ago and I just want to make it clear, just remember, just because something is passed to the developers doesn't mean it's actually going to come into the game. It just means that it's gone on to consideration from the community to the developers. So a lot of the ideas in the past have been put into the game, but don't take it as a 100% guarantee. Today in this video we're going to be going over the ground forces that is going to be passed on to the developers or already has. And then in other videos we'll have a look at the helicopters, we'll have a look at the aircraft, and we'll have a look at also the maps and missions, the gameplay stuff and the tweaks and everything like that, all of the wonderful and interesting things. So let's get started. What is the first thing that was passed? Well, this is the light tank Stingray, and pretty much if you take this one seems kind of ridiculous to me, but it did exist. You take a Sheridan, so we have the Sheridan in game, right? The light tank from the Americans with the quite large caliber gun on it, which can sling heat and ATGM. Take that gun off it, modify the turret a little bit, and add a 105mm. Basically, the suggestion here says that the gun is similar to that used on the M60 and the Leopard 1, so you're pretty much looking at either an L7 copy or something very similar to that, and it just looks completely ridiculous, doesn't it? I mean, just the mounting of the turret and the gun, I don't understand how balanced this is, but it definitely looks interesting, right? And here is the actual Stingray itself. So yeah, pretty much take a Sheridan, the one we already have in game, change the turret a little bit, especially the front of it, and stick a 105 on it. I mean, to me, that sounds awesome. The question is, would it still keep its light tank status, or would it morph into a weird, medium tank? I suppose it would probably keep its light tank status, but overall, it would probably be as useful as the Sheridan in game, which is not very useful, since it is way too big. The next one is some T-30 forts, so the T-30's ammo box. Now SearchBee here has done a wonderful job at looking into the different rounds that the T-30 could use. Now this is kind of prevalent right now, since of course we are getting the T-30 in game as an event vehicle. We are halfway through the event where the T-30 is here, and the one which was available, or at least the one that was given to me in a test drive, and not an official one, but, as a third party, it had access to AP and APC-BC. Now, what SearchBee has done is he's gone through the official records, and he's found some of these shots which this thing actually has. So, at the end of the day, if we have a look through them, basically it has a HE shell, it has a Willy Pete shell, which is the smoke shell. I don't think we'll ever have Willy Pete actually come to the game, but it would be an interesting thought. Let's just call it smoke shell. It has an APBC-HE shell, then it has a APC-BC-HE shell, and also a HVAP shell. Now, even though all of this information is really interesting, and the reason why I'm not going into it that much is because Gaijin have already said in many AMAs, at least 3 I can actually think of, is there are specific things that they use to balance vehicles which aren't just BRs and ranks, and, well, BRs mainly, sorry, or BRs only. Ranks don't come into the matchmaking idea. But the other thing that they use to balance vehicles is the ammunition that they have. So instead of just giving everything its full historical ammunition loads, instead what it does is it takes away ones which they believe would either would make the vehicle too powerful at its BR, or they don't want to up-tier it by giving it, specified rounds because they don't think it would fit in that place. So I feel like the T-30 is going to be the same way. It's going to have all of, it's not going to have all of these rounds because it would be seen as it would have to go up in BR too much, and therefore it would be completely obsolete, or instead you would want it to be a little bit more fun, with its extra armor. So yeah, even though there is 5 different rounds that this T-30 could actually use, my guess is that we're going to get a standard AP one and a standard HE one, and then maybe an APC BC, and then that's about it. So yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's a really good well, not really an article, but a really good blog post or forum post here from SearchBee. I would definitely say go and read it. The next one is the Grim Reaper M48A3. Now, we have the standard M48 in game. What is the difference between it and the M48A3 Reaper? Well, the main thing is the field modification. So, this is a Vietnam field modification. Sorry, I have something in my mustache. But the Grim Reaper was take an M48, chuck a bunch of guns on it. And by that I mean small caliber guns, so basically 50 cals. You can see in this picture here that they just mounted 50 cal onto 50 cal onto 50 cal, and there's even a dog on the picture, which I'm sure they could use as some kind of projectile. But the idea is you have the standard 90mm, you have the 7.62 coaxial, you have the 50 caliber on the top. Let's just add more guns to it to be able to deal with either infantry or maybe some air stuff which is coming in. Now, there was even a version of this so-called Grim Reaper which had a minigun on it. So somebody stuck a minigun on, on an M48. And you can even see here that they had 50 cals even mounted on the back of the tanks. So they were just all over the place when it came to it. And the idea of a minigun on it would be kind of funny. But for me, you know, basically this forum post here is arguing, or by Retry, is arguing, you know, should this be put into the game? Is it different enough? And also, you know, should it be a premium or should it be just a normal tech tree vehicle? And for me, there isn't that much difference between it and the M48 we have in game. I would personally say it would be a nice little premium, but then again, America has had a ton of premiums over the last few years, so maybe you stick it in the tree. I'm not entirely sure how I stand on it, really. But the idea of just having an M48 and just sticking a bunch of guns on it sounds very fun to me. It kind of reminds me of the Shot Cal Dalet, which just got added to the British tree, you know, the Centurion with a bunch of guns on it. So yeah, would be nice to see. The next one is, of course, the Schutzen Panzer Marder 1A3, done by .xl, who is a very active member of the community. And if you don't know what this Marder 1A3 is, well, it's basically an IFV for the Germans. Right now, if you look at the top of the German line, they've pretty much got the Baguette Panzer, and that's about it. So a lot of people are looking at alternatives, which, you know, which could fit. Now, a lot of people have brought up the Weasel, which I think would be really fun, and the other side of the coin is also the Marder. Now, the Marder is a machine which has, I believe it's a 20mm on it. Yeah, Rheinmetall 20mm on it. You're pretty much looking at 40 to 44mm of penetration on its APDS, so this thing ain't gonna pen that much, but what they could do, I'm sure, is stick an ATGM on it, because most or the majority of these new age IFVs were able to stick stuff like that on top, so it fits much of a role, kind of like how the BMP-2 does in the Soviet tree, maybe a little bit lower, but the idea is to have a higher tier, very fast, very mobile scout tank, and I think the Marder 1A3 for the Germans fits really well, and I would love to see it in game. Obviously, it's been made in huge numbers, and for me, I think a vehicle like this deserves to be in the game, even if they decide to put it at a lower BR because of its weak primary armament. The next one is another German vehicles, or set of vehicles. These are the ST-KFC 250s and the ST-KFC 251s. If you don't know what these are the half-tracks that you normally see in most war movies, you know, where you see the half-tracks and they have an MG42 or MG34 on the front. Sometimes they have a mortar, sometimes they have rockets on them. You know, they're very prevalent in a lot of games and also a lot of movies because they're general troop transport, and also with the addition of being aggressive with their form of weaponry. Well, they made a bunch of different ones. So here's one. It has a short-barreled 75mm gun on it. Looks a little bit wonky, but, it could easily come to game. Then you got a 37mm version. Of course, the long-barreled 50mm version, and I'm sure they probably made a long-barreled 75 as well. But here's another short-barreled 75mm with a 20mm, and there is the long-barreled 75. So there are many options for this machine. The basic half-track model is very simple, and it was used throughout the war for Germany. It would be lovely to see it come to the game. The fact that we nearly have all of the 234s in game, I think it's time to start expanding into the 221s, and wait, is it the 221s or is it the 222s? Let's just make sure to check. Yeah, the 221s. It's either time to start, or is it the 220s? Am I having a brain fart? Nope, it's the 221s. So we already have a 221 in game, obviously the Squeezy Boy. But for me personally, there are other versions which could come to game. There's also the 2222s, which are the longer versions with more wheels. One, I believe, had a 30mm, or at least in Men of War it had a 30mm. And then you got the 250s, which you see here, which, as a gun platform, you could pretty much stick anything on it. So, for me, I can see this coming to game. Hopefully not as a gift version. Hopefully we see maybe one as a gift version, and then the rest we see in the actual tech tree. The next one is a abomination, but it did exist. This is a prototype M48 with the turret of a Leopard 2. Because why not? Why not take an M48 chassis and just donk a Leopard 2 turret on it? God damn. So yeah, this monstrosity is here, and a lot of people are, well, at least on the Discord over the last few weeks, have been discussing, should this thing be in the American tree, or should this be in the German tree? Well, for me, it should be in the German tree, and the reason for this is because the M48 chassis, it was, not given to the Germans, but it was, these were German M48s, which were used to plonk the Leopard turrets on. So it wasn't as if it was a joint partnership or anything like that. It was, well, I'm sure it was a little bit, but it was mainly a German idea to stick the Leopard 2 turrets on top of the M48 chassis to try and upgun it, to try and make it a little bit better, to try and retrofit it so it would give it, a little bit more firepower. You see a lot of this throughout, history, where you kind of get obsolete chassis and then they try and actually bring them back in the form of upgunning them or making them either armored carriers or something like that, circa Kangaroo or circa Su-85A that we've just seen recently. And to me, this effort seems to be very similar to that. And if I was going to stick it somewhere, I would stick it into the German tree. Do I think the German tree needs it? No, not really, to be honest. And I think a lot of people wouldn't very much like it because of its gun and because of its turret, it would be quite a high BR. But because its chassis isn't as fast as a lot of them that you see around the higher BRs, and on top of this, it's quite weak. It doesn't have a lot of the armor that others do. I think a lot of people will get frustrated using this thing because of the high profile of it, and also the fact that it's not very fast, and also the fact that the armor is lacking. The next one is another light tank. This is of Soviet design, the Object 934. Now, look at this damn thing. So, 100mm gun on it, long-barreled. It was designed to fire 80 GMs and also other rounds, and the idea was that it would be a light tank which would be able to be used for infantry supports. It would also be used to be able to support naval landings, since I don't think it was amphibious. It might have been amphibious. I'll just have a look for you. Let's see. Oh no, it may actually be amphibious. But the main thing for me is the hydro-pneumatic suspension on it. The fact that it could go incredibly low to the ground, like you can see. It was incredibly lightweight, but in true Soviet fashion, let's stick a massive gun on it. And that's what they did. Obviously, this was only a prototype, but they did fully build it. And for me, It would be really nice to see. I have no idea what BR you stick this at, though. But the main thing is that it gets 80 gems. It is a light vehicle, so it'll probably get scouting. It is quite long, though, as you can see, and it doesn't have a lot of armor on it. So basically, you're looking at a 906, brother, which looks a little bit more wonky than the 906, but I think it would be a hell of a lot of fun, especially with people screwing around with the hydropneumatic suspension. I would really like to see this in game. I've really enjoyed the BMP2, the BMP1 and the Object 906. I would love to see something else added to that little area, which is as fun, and I feel like the 934 would be able to do it in its amphibious form. The next one is the ISU-130. So, you've heard of the 122, you've heard of the 152, you've heard of the 85, why not stick a massive naval gun on it? Oh, sorry, my shoulder is hurting from a workout earlier. So, what is the ISU-130? Well, imagine if you just took a ISU, which we already have in game, and then just stuck a long-barreled 130mm on it. A 122mm, which is the one that you see here. So this is the BL9 gun. It is a naval gun, which is kind of similar to the one that we have in the SU-100Y, and it was designed to put very large holes in very large things, since it was a destroyer cannon. Well, when you when you stick it on a tank chassis and decide to point it in a direction of something, it normally exacerbates that as well and just absolutely annihilates whatever is on the other side. So the ISU-130, it would be another in a long line of Soviet tanks, tank destroyers that we have around, the 5 to maybe 7 BR, which are incredibly slow, don't have enough armor, reloads are too long, and don't always have the ability to one-shot stuff, and don't have the best penetration, and so overall not very good tanks, even when fully upgraded. But why not add another one with a ridiculous gun? I remember, was it the BL-10 gun in World of Tanks that everybody was scared of? Why can't we just get one of them in the game, if it existed or not? The BL-9 obviously existed. But as I said, this thing is just a bit of a monstrosity. But it was built, so eventually, for me, it should come to game. I feel like this could be a pretty good gift premium, but I don't think people would be happy with it because of the fact that the gun wouldn't be very good and the chassis would be incredibly slow. The next one is a Challenger 2 prototype, so once again people wanting to expand everything. The Challenger 2 prototype, if you don't know what it is, basically take a Challenger chassis and then stick a Vickers 8 turret on it. That's pretty much what we're looking at. The hull was just a straight up Challenger 1 hull, and then they added, or the Vickers company added the what they wanted as the Vickers Mark 8 turret on top of it. So we've had a look at the Vickers Mark 8 before. It was supposed to be an export tank, and the issue that it had was that it used parts from Germany and it used parts from Britain. Obviously, the British government didn't like this. The German government also didn't like this, so they pulled the actual orders, and the British government basically said sod off and all of this, and politics ensued. They didn't really get any orders as well for the Vickers machines because they were incredibly expensive, and even though they had top-of-the-line technology, when you're trying to export a model to, let's call them lesser countries, even though I don't think that's really fair, let's just say countries which don't have as much economical power as others, that can make them struggle, because they can't afford such great technology. So, the Vickers went back and obviously designed some other stuff, such as this turret. So, this turret has the L30 gun on it, and also it has a few upgrades to it. This is a late 80s model, and we're looking at the Challenger 2 prototype. A lot of people have asked me why I don't want to see the MBT-80 in-game, which was basically the test bed for the armor that we see on the Challenger 1. It's because it would be a hunk of junk. To be quite honest, it's too big. It looks, it's too big, its silhouette is too massive, wouldn't be very fast, it would just be a pain to play, which is why I don't think we've seen it in game yet. So yeah, the Challenger 2 prototype, I mean, it is basically the next step in the evolution of the British tanks, which I'm sure we'll see in game. Am I happy about it? No. Is it going to happen? Yes. And the reason why it will happen is because, well, we already have the Type 90, don't we? Which is basically the equivalent of this thing. The next one is a fun one. So this is the Centurion AVRE, but it isn't just one, it isn't just the AVRE, it is the Radeon Aggie. Now, what is the Radeon Aggie? Well, the normal AVRE had a 290mm gun. This has a 300mm recoilless gun on it, and the idea was, well, you know, the 290 was also a recoilless gun, but the 300 that you see here, it was designed just to launch the same type of ammunition at the enemy. So slightly bigger gun, but the same ammunition. I'm sure if they decided to push forward with this design, they would have made the same caliber shells for it, but this is basically what the shell looked like. And since we have the Centurion AVRE in game, why not have the Churchill one? I think this would be a perfect premium when it comes to the gift variety. You know, in the summer event or, you know, the festive event. I feel like I would personally be very happy to see this. But I understand that some people would be like, well, this is useless. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's an event vehicle. I don't want it to be meta. Otherwise, you get everybody complaining at the AirSats and the KV-220, like everybody does. But yeah, the 290mm mortar was replaced with a 300mm recoilless rifle. And obviously, I had a few issues. When you have a 300mm gun, normally what happens is it's designed to put a lot of holes in, you know, whatever it shoots at, but the other issue is it might put a hole in your tank itself by the amount of recoil that it has and also the breech falling apart and smashing up the place. So, obviously, they decided to stick with just the 290. I'm sure there was other reasons instead of just, you know, the issues with the gun stability, probably because the 290 was already accepted by that point. The next vehicle is the FV721 Fox. This is an armored reconnaissance vehicle, as you can see, an ARV. It is a four-wheeled little diddler with a 30mm pump gun on it, with access to grenades in the form of smoke, and to be, this looks like a really fun little armored car. The nice little addition to it as well is that it could carry Milan ATGMs on it, or Milan missiles, and if you have a look, let's just see, if you have a look somewhere, there is actually a picture of it. Where is it? I'm not sure where I put it, but yeah, basically you have this, the Fox Milan prototype. I'm not sure if it was ever made, but basically all you have to do is stick an ATGM on the top of it. It can't be very hard to do. And that would mean that instead of just having this machine with its 30mm that you see here, and also having its scouting abilities, it would also have access to an ATGM, so you could up-tier it pretty high. The one thing that we haven't really seen a lot of is modern vehicles breaking into the lower ranks. I think the lowest ranked vehicle that we have, which is, or could be classed as from the modern era, would be the R3, the prototype of the AA with the stabilized Oerlikon on the top. That is a 1970s vehicle, and it's a 3.3. I feel like a lot of these vehicles, like the FV721, could be put at those low BRs without the ATGM and used as a scout vehicle. You know, you don't have to give it crazy ammunition. You don't have to give it, rounds which penetrate the front of everything. Instead, just give it scouting and give it, decent ammunition, and people can just fly about with it and have a bit of fun. Because for me, that's what scouting is. So the majority of it is about trying to get behind enemy lines, trying to get the scouts off, and then trying to help your team win through that. I know a lot of people want to, be bruisers and go through the middle, but for me, I prefer flanking and spanking, especially with scouts. So, The next one is the Type 90B. Now, the Type 90 we already have in game. The Type 90B, the literal only difference between this and the and the one we have in game is this little lower plate. And this lower plate is designed to hold this, which is a mine. It's a mine something or other. If I cannot, let's see. So it's a minor modification of the Type 90 equipped with low front plate add-ons that serve to install the Type 92 mine roller. There you go. So it literally is no different to the normal Type 90, apart from it could have an extension of a mine roller on it because of some lower front plate changes. I suppose we've just had the Challenger Mark III added. And the only real difference is the ERA on the sides and the composite, and also the lower plate changes. So it's possible. I mean, for me, one of the big things is we need to have. It seems like the standard now is to have 2 top-tier MBTs per nation, and since Japan only has 1, we need to find another top-tier MBT. Now, I don't want it to be the Type 10, because that would be ridiculous, but there is a possibility of another version of the Type 90, kind of like how the Challenger has another version now, or you could go backwards and give them the STC 1, which is the prototype for the Type 90. So, yeah, it's possible. I mean, either way, you're pretty much getting 2 Type 90s. It just depends on how you want to do it. Do you want to take the existing model and change it slightly with this low plate, or do you want to slightly change it in the form of its prototype? Overall, I think both options fit well, and as I said, I do think every nation should have 2 top-tier MBTs, because that is the standard which has been laid out by America, Germany, and the Soviets. The next one... Hello? Hey, Bernard. The next one is the Type 10. Get out of my face, it's a 2010 tank. I'll talk about it when we actually have stuff like that announced. I'm not interested in 2010 Type 10s. It's way too early. Hi, Bernard. Come on. The AMX, come on. The AMX-13 Chaffee. So if you don't know what the AMX-13 Chaffee is, pretty much take an AMX-13 chassis and stick a Chaffee turret on it. That is the best way to actually describe the thing. And what you have is obviously the 75 M3 from the Americans. You have the standard turret of the Chaffee, and also the chassis of the AMX-13. I think this will be a great combo. To be honest, the AMX-13 FL11 functions very similarly to how this would feel. Maybe it'll be slightly better than this just because of no, wait. Is it an autoloader? I don't think it is an autoloader. But anyway, no matter the case, it would be very similar to this machine. I personally really enjoy the AMX-13 series of tanks that we have in game right now. I think they're very fun to use, slightly underpowered, but that's okay. I'm underpowered in the form of engine, I mean, but I think that's alright. They still serve their purpose well, and this would be, just an addition to that line. The next one is the AMX-32. Of course, the AMX-32 is a 1979 prototype. It has the 105mm in it. We talked about it before. It was stabilized through a Commander panoramic sight, and a lot of people have been talking about this being the, the top tier French MBT. I think now that we've had the AMX-40, and also we've had the Ariete pre-series be confirmed, whatever the hell that means. I feel like the Leclerc is pretty much around the corner. So the AMX-32 would be nice to see, but I have got a real big feeling that this is going to be the 9.0 premium for the French. I mean, it has all the hallmarks. It has good speed, it has good maneuverability, doesn't have the best armor, has access to the 120G1, which should be stabilized with APFSDS, very similar to what we see from the British, very similar to what we see from the Leopard A1A1L44. So for me, it's a no-brainer. It fits in there. It's a prototype, it's weird, it's wonderful, it's got the 20 on it still. So yeah, it fits that, and it doesn't really fit, with the AMX-40, but the Leclerc does. I am positive we will see this in the game. I'm just wondering, will we see it as a standard tech tree or a premium? And my bet is it's going to be the 9.0 Premium, because I don't know what else they put in that slot, which is at least known about. The next one is the Panhard. This is the AML-90. It's a little armoured car, four-wheeled, with a big 90mm on it. The French love their 90mm, and as you can see, it has an interesting muzzle brake on it. It was used by other countries as well, but for me, I think it would be fun to have in the game. It's pretty simple. It's another armoured car with a little bit of speed and a little bit of a 90. It's very similar to the AUBL-74 that has just been added to the Italian tree, and I don't see why not a version or something very similar couldn't be added to the French tree as well. It has a coaxial 7.62 as well, and could be used for scouting in the game. It's another vehicle that doesn't have a lot of armor. There's a lot of vehicles here that don't have a lot of armor, and as I've said before, I feel like the triad, like the armor, gun, and mobility, armor is really getting left in the wayside when it comes to War Thunder. But overall, if people enjoy that, right? The next one is the AMX-5120, the Sublinder. This is the AMX-5120 before the Surbassé, which we have in the game already. The issue with the Sublinder is that it had problems which I don't think would really be manifested that much in-game. The Sublinder had issues with its transmission, had issues with its weight, had issues with its engine, all of these things. And basically the Surbassé, which is the one we have, as I said in the game, all of those problems were fixed. So the Sublinder, I definitely think, could be added to the game. It's a very similar gun to the Surbassé, and would fit pretty well in the 7073 area. There was only one of them built, though, so I don't think it would be a good gift premium. It might, in the I-7 event where we had to build a tank, I know a lot of people have some negative ideas about that event. I thought it was okay. I think we could do one of those events for a vehicle like this. I think that could definitely work in a cool way, and people could get their hands on an auto-loading 120 around the 7OBR. The next one is a Panzer 61. Now this is a Swiss vehicle, or from Switzerland, and it's pretty much a standard as all hell MBT with an L7 on it. The Swiss are very good at standardizing pretty much everything, and here they have made the most bog standard tank you could even think of. This is a Cold War. Obviously Panzer 61, I believe 1961 actually goes to when it was put in service or when it was approved of production, so that's where it gets its name from. But yeah, it's got the bog standard L7 on it. It looks exactly like you would see any tank from Switzerland. I don't know how else to put it. Like the Swiss take everything and just make it as simple as possible and kind of just put it in its place. So for me, when I look at the Panzer 61, that's what I see. The last one is another light tank. This is from Brazil this time. So Brazil actually got a bunch of L3s, they got a bunch of M3 Stuarts, they got a bunch of different and weird and wonderful light tanks, and then they also got a few French tanks. Then, after getting these French tanks, they decided to build one of their own. And this is the weird and wonderful machine that they came up with. It's the X1A light tank. They also made the X1A1 and the X1A2, I believe they're called. The main function of these things was to be still competitive, still cheap, and also maneuverable to be able to deal with the terrain of South America and also any other terrain that the Brazilians would have to run into. The main basis of this when it comes to armament was the 90mm, the French DIFA gun, D921. It could fire heat, HESH, and APFS-DS, so this is obviously going to be a high-tier vehicle. On top of this, it had a coaxial, and it had a little itty-bitty engine in it. The other thing as well is that it had 260 horsepower, and the armor was pretty much designed to deal with small autocannon or small arms fire. It was never really designed to deal with anything larger. On top of this, as I said, they made the X1A1, which have, if you look here, you know, you have the two boggles, or whatever you want to call them, bogies, and then you have the 3 here, so that's how you can tell them apart. Same gun, 90s as normal, and then they made a version where they took off the turret, and you could put on 300mm rockets, because why the hell not? Because let's have a bit of fun. Type 75, how you doing? I think I've seen one Type 75 in battle, and he had the great opportunity of murdering himself. It was hilarious to watch. My feeling would be the X1A1 with these rockets would do exactly the same thing. And here's the X1A2. It's slightly different when it comes to the hull design, but overall very similar. So once again, another light tank, which would be lovely to see, using a French gun. And we're talking about the X1A here because the others had used different guns. So with this machine, I'm guessing the idea would be to put it as a premium in the French tree, or maybe some kind of international tree. It would make a return. I personally would enjoy using it. I don't think it would ever be meta, but with APFS-DS, anything is possible, especially at the correct BR, as we are seeing with some of the Italian vehicles. Anyway, that was all of the ground vehicles that have been passed on to the developers in the month of December 2018. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.